Resistance is a part of growth, so embrace it. That is a message and a quote from Jimmie Stephens, a husband of 28 years, a pastor, the author of the Jimmie Rules. I read the book, the author of the Jimmie Rules and relationship counselor. So today, he's here to share how facing challenges head on can help you build more emotional, healthy relationships with the people around you. It will lead you into your purpose and create legacy that lasts a lifetime. Peace and blessings, Jimmy. How's it going today?
Hey, it's going great. It's good to be here, brother. Good to be here.
Nah, thank you for coming on today. So we're gonna jump right in. So, Jimmy, you've been married 28 years. That's an
Right.
incredible milestone. That's longer than some of us been born, right?
Yeah, without a doubt. Thank you for reminding me. Yeah, yeah,
I'm pretty sure you got some stories to tell, man. 28 years, you know what I'm saying? So
yeah, yeah.
that's great right there. So, how has marriage shaped the way you approach life, leadership, and just relationships? Not just the relationship with your wife, but just relationships in general.
Uh, so first off, it's everything, right? It's framed with whoever you marry, they're gonna impact your narrative, your perspective in life, period. Because this is a person you're connected to emotionally. So you have to be able to at some point adjust and buy into their perspective. Now, I've been married 28 years. All of my shit is where have been great for my wife, right? For me, that was cool because I was doing what I wanted to do in terms of not listening, not valuing her opinion, her experience. So I learned how to grow up in short of it in marriage, meaning it wasn't about me. My way was not the only way. My thoughts were not because I thought it doesn't mean it's correct or it's good for my wife and all my children. So I had to learn how to listen. I had to learn how to check myself. I had to learn how to value my wife in her perspective and how she approached life versus how I approach life. So it caused me to allow more information or more ideas to be more open in terms of valuing people and their perspective and how they view things. So it shaped me in terms of just being able to be a better person, a better human, so that I'm not going through life with this narrative because I think it and it's correct, it's right without considering other people. So it has shaped my life and shaped my perspective and shaped how I deal with people in relationships. So now when I'm in a situation and someone's different than I am, I value that difference. I value that interaction because it only allows me to become a better communicator, a better person because I'm learning from someone I may not necessarily agree with, or we may not see eye to eye, but I've learned to value people, and the difference is the value, not what we agree upon, but the actual difference. So, in short, that's really how relationship or my marriage has shaped my perspective and my view on life.
Now, what happened in your relationship would you say that caused you to shift your perspective of seeing things her way and actually listening, which is
Well,
key to a strong relationship and leadership as well?
yeah, true without a doubt, and I know somebody was praying. She was praying. Somebody was praying because I had no idea, right? So first we're married and we're I lived in Southern California for 26 years. So about
Can I ask you a question real quick?
yeah, yeah,
Does it does it not rain in Southern California?
it does it.
Okay, that's a Tony. If y'all don't
Yeah,
know, Tony
yeah,
2020 was a group
yeah.
in the
Yeah,
90s.
I
We're
mean,
talking
yeah,
about
it's
that. They had a song called It Never Rains in Southern California. So go ahead. I just
yeah,
wanted to ask you that question.
yeah, it's a very, very rare, but it happens. It's periodic. But anyway, so we moved from California to Atlanta. Um, and then a lot of our challenges were in California because that's where we got married at. And I remember just coming, this was a few years after us moving to Georgia. It just hit me one day that my wife was not as engaging as she used to be, meaning verbally, because she used to ask me a bunch of questions and it used to get on my nerves. And I would just, I'm tired, I'm tired of questions. And so it got to the point where she just was not engaging. And it just hit me one day like, man, and I started thinking, it was the last time she really s- was communicating me, questioning me, or asking me various things. And as I started thinking about that, I'm like, man, she has been e emotionally or communication checked out. So with this task conversation, and in that epiphany, that revelation that hit me, got me thinking. And then I was like, oh, and then I asked her, I said, have you kind of disengaged from me in terms of communication, in terms of talking? And it's like it was like a deer in the headlight. She was like, at some like you finally realized this. And
Mm.
so that's when we had a conversation. And during that time, because I'm a proponent of personal growth and development. So I took it upon myself to learn how to be a better version of me as a husband, uh, listening, valuing. So I began a quest to find out what was up with me, the adjustments I needed to make, and then learning to value those adjustments. And so little by little by little, I started seeing this way of life that I was experiencing or my wife was experiencing because of my behavior. So this is where I started my journey in terms of being able to really help couples because I'm in the same space. That experience and intention are two different things. So I can intend one thing for my spouse but her experience can be different. So a relationship is not about intention, but a relationship is about experience. So I begin to readjust my perspective in life in relationships by understanding the true value. My true effort does not need to be in what I intend to do, but it needs to be in how my wife experiences what I do. Because her experience allows the reciprocity to happen. She's going to give back based on what she's getting. And so if I'm not intentional about giving the experience that's good, then reciprocity says what I'm getting back is not going to be good. So that's when I begin to really hone in and become a student for myself on, okay, communication. What does that mean? Relationship, how it impacts, and valuing the differences and valuing the challenges, because that's life. And if you got a different idea of life, then you're going to go through life very disappointed, frustrated, and angry because you don't understand what life is supposed to give you.
Brief interruption real quick. If you listen to this and you like what you're hearing, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button below. Therefore, you're notified whenever we have another Men of Valor, Husbands of Purpose podcast. Also, you can share it out if you find this episode valuable. And fellas, if you're looking to have a deeper relationship with your wife, cultivate more conversations, more intimacy, download our free video guide. It's in the descriptions below, or you can just go to connectionconversations.com, download our free video guide, and start getting more intimate with your wife and just really build that bond, build that friendship, build that love. Go to connectionconversations.com, or you can just click the link in the description. Peace and blessings. Back to the episode. Someone may be listening right now and say, Jimmie, that sounds great. So how can a husband change their perspective or their listening skills like right now in this moment to give their wife that experience? Because, a lot of us, we intend to do certain things, but then we don't do it. So how can they
Right.
change that experience, with their wife right now?
So it's controlling what you can control. Many times, men and women are looking for their spouse to change. So you put the intention and attention on yourself, not your spouse. So I hold myself accountable, not my wife. Meaning I hold myself accountable for my communication, for my listening, for my adjustments, understanding my role. My role is not to lord my wife, coach my wife. My wife is my wife. Her personality, her process is her personality, her process. So understanding my role as a husband and my role as being the best version of myself, my wife will feed off of that. So if you are looking for your spouse to change, because that's for you, that's the tension. Okay, my wife tripping. She don't, she always do all this. She always talking about that. She don't respect me. She don't. And so when someone says that to me, I'm hearing, okay, I'm hearing their experience. A woman will give you what she's getting. So anytime a man is frustrated, he's telling on himself in terms of with his wife.
Mm.
So if she's upset because she doesn't respect you, all I'm hearing is your wife is experiencing you in a very bad way. Because a woman by nature will respect a man who she loves and values. She won't respect a person who, or submit to a person or listen to a person who is emotionally damaging her, hurting her, not giving her a sense of value. So you're sharing, okay, she doesn't respect me. Okay, well that's saying that she's giving you what she's experiencing. So women by nature will gravitate toward a man who is valuing her, who is entreating her with a level of respect. All things being equal, meaning because some sisters come from very toxic emotional environments. That's another conversation, another adjustment. But even with that, you can only control you. So the intention always has to be on your actions, not your spouse's. Because if a man changes his actions, it really takes about 1 to 3 months. And I've been doing this for a while, for a woman to start mirroring your new behavior as long as you're consistent.
And that sounds like that reminds me of the scripture I'm about to paraphrase, but it's like, how can you take, I'm paraphrasing, I'm going to chop it up, but how
Right.
can you take the needle or something out of someone else's eye when you got a beam in your own
Right.
eye?
Right.
So it's like
Right. That,
let's start with self-reflection first, because what I'm hearing and what I know, what I've had to do is like, let me work on myself, let me change myself. And the more I change myself, the better the relationship is going to be with my wife, because she's going to see me changing. And it may, like you said, it may take a month, it may take 2 months, but if she sees
right.
me change, she's going to change as well. Reciprocity
There you
by
go.
law, it has to, it
Exactly.
has to kick in.
Exactly. It has to, and that's what happens. So when I begin to change, she began to change. So when I begin to listen and value and communicate in a way, when you said that, it made me feel this way. It made her adjust. So when she's communicating to me, it's the same way. So we're not reactive. We process and then we communicate. Communicate your experience, not attack. That's the framework of the healthy communication process. We communicate what we're experiencing. We don't react from what we experienced. The difference is you can hear that action made your spouse feel neglected, unloved, hurt, versus the spouse feeling neglected, unloved, and hurt, and then reacting. That's going to create more toxic experiences. So now we're processing, okay, why am I angry? Because her tone. How did the tone make you feel? Made me feel disrespected. And then we're staring at when you talk to me like that, I feel disrespected. So now she makes the adjustment. You didn't go off on her. You didn't close her off. You didn't give her silent treatment, right? You didn't give her a cold shoulder. You communicated your experience with her behavior.
And
The brother, exactly.
communication, yeah, communication is one of those keys, like a lot of times we just fly off the cuff. It's been times where I was flying off the cuff. I done,
Right,
put my hand, broke down the bathroom door at one point in time, just
yeah,
acting all out of order
right,
because I wasn't
right,
able to communicate properly. And,
exactly.
just just out of frustration, and by
Yes,
me doing that, I was having her flare up even more. I wasn't bringing my best, so she wasn't bringing her best.
exactly. Exactly. And truthfully, where did we learn how to communicate? Most of us never saw it, right? Especially black males. We grew up I'm dating myself. I grew up I graduated in 1988. So dysfunctionality was the norm. My mother loved me in her dysfunctional way. That's all she had. So by product, that's all I got. I become dysfunctional. So when a dysfunctional person enters a relationship with somebody, all they're bringing is their dysfunctional ways, unless there's some information. For me, that's what happened. New information, new understanding, new perspective, new behaviors. Right. So now we create an environment in our home where our children are nothing like the dysfunctional experience I've had. All we did was holler, fight, cuss, yell, scream. That's how we communicated in the house. So now what happens when you get married? You bring that with you. So you gotta understand that that negative experience, although your mama loved you, your parents love you, they gave you the dysfunctional habits that they had because truthfully, most didn't have a healthy home environment. So now the learning process happens, right? Which is learning how to talk, learning how to process your own pain versus going through life reacting. And that's a skill. Communication is a skill just like any other skill you have. And it's a learned skill. It don't come because you love somebody. Don't come because you've been together with somebody. It comes because you learn, you discipline yourself, you get information, and you connect that with repetition. That's how we learn.
Connecting with repetition is like you changing the habits, those old
Exactly.
habits, how we learned or didn't learn how to communicate. Now we're adults and it's like, okay, what do I do? So it start relearning or learning
Right.
new habits to bring forth to the relationship so you can be,
Right.
so a person can essentially be, that that husband and wife that their children can look up to and be like, okay, this is what a true marriage looks like. Yes, there's some
Right.
issues, there's some trials, but we see our parents sit down and talk about it versus cussing, yelling, and we see them sticking it in for the long haul. And
Right.
one thing that we, couples that we speak to, we gotta tell them like you have to get uncomfortable before
Yes.
you can get comfortable. So you got to have those
Ex-
uncomfortable conversations so you can
Yeah.
get comfortable having those conversations.
That's
And
right.
even with that, you're learning how to grow. You're learning how
Yes.
to grow doing those conversations.
Right. Critical. Right. And that's what it is. It is uncomfortable because you haven't done it. It's like brushing your teeth with your left hand if you're right-handed. This awkward, it's different. It's man, this don't feel right. Communicating, processing your feelings, sharing your feelings. It creates an emotional healthy person. Period. An emotional healthy person can give the best version of themselves. Emotional healthy person has control. To be out of control is to not understand how to have an inward system, meaning I'm angry and be able to check the anger. Why am I angry? Why am I upset? Asking yourself those questions so that you can rationally engage with the emotional experience you're having so that the emotional experience doesn't carry you away to some other negative space you don't want to be in because you didn't check the feeling. So I push back against the feeling. Like validate your existence here. Is the anger past? Does it have to do with this situation or is this me tripping? that allows me then to mentally engage with the feeling. And that's where the disconnect happens. That's where you're not building up that cortisol level because you're rationally engaging in your emotional experience versus the feeling it and reacting. I feel it and I think through it. Okay, why am I angry? Why am I frustrated? And when you identify it, you will notice that the anger subsides because now you're mentally engaging and you've moved away from the emotional process and now you're in the rational process. That's a skill, that's a habit, right? Like any other thing.
Have you ever heard of the 5 minute rule?
Yeah, yeah,
Where it's
uh,
like where
yeah,
it's like you something happens, you sit for 5 minutes and you're like, well, I can't change it. Like everything you're saying, like you take into account for everything you're doing, and you give yourself basically about 5 minutes. And they say as
right,
time goes on, that time gets shorter and shorter because you realize, okay, this happened. I'm learning. I create the habit of adjusting to it, self-reflecting, seeing that
right,
what can I do about it, what shouldn't I do, and so on and so forth.
right. Yeah, I have. And so my process is a little different because it's a more laser pinpointed process. So the goal is this. I approach it from the perspective of understanding all humans are emotional and rational, but you can't operate out of both at the same time. So I'm either in an emotional state or I'm in a rational state. So the emotional state can stop if I rationally engage, meaning I think through the moment I think about, okay, why am I upset? Soon as I ask myself that question, I disengage from the emotional process. Now I'm in a rational process. So the emotional process never builds to the extent that it takes me off guard. Now, again, that's a development habit. So, especially for people who have short tempers, like if you have a short temper, then it's deep breathing, and it's maybe your 5 minute rule, which in other words, holding your breath and then breathing out. I call it 4-4-12. Inhale for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, then exhale for 12, because your body is what's building the feeling of anger. So when you calm your body down, you disengage from that emotional tension, that cortisol begins to subside because I've relaxed my body. And at that point, your body doesn't feel like it's threatened because that's where all this stuff comes from.
It's like the scriptures say, let patience have its perfect work, right?
Yes,
So it's like
exactly.
when you're taking that time to breathe, and when you look at the word like spirit, it means
Right.
breath, right? When you look
Yes.
at the word spirit, it means
Right.
breath, right? So it's like taking that time to breathe, letting the Holy
Yeah.
Spirit come within you, and
Right.
then letting patience have her perfect work, being patient.
Exactly.
And then it says, well, you're not entirely wanting anything. So you're not lacking anything. You have a chance to let me evaluate the situation, let me get myself together, and what is the next logical thing to do outside of being emotional?
Thinking through what you're feeling, identifying what it is I'm feeling. The whole process of thinking and identifying removes you from the emotional space because now I'm in my rational space. I'm thinking through what am I feeling? Why do I feel this way? Okay, I'm upset. Why are you upset? And I'm asking myself this question because of what she said. What she say? She said this, and I felt what? Hurt. I felt unloved. I felt unwanted. Just that whole process removes you from emotionally engaging because mentally you're there. And once I identify what I'm feeling, you really you can actually sense the difference. Now you're not angry. Then you're able to say, when you made that statement, I felt unloved. I felt hurt. I felt like you didn't want me. Now that's how we begin a conversation. Identifying what the emotional experience is and being able to share that emotional experience so that two people can rationally have a conversation who love each other and give each other the respect needed when things are tense because you're hurt, you're broke. I mean, so things can easily escalate if you don't practice pulling back, thinking through, identifying, and then sharing.
So this is big on, definitely self-reflection and self-awareness. And one thing you said earlier, like, is this being triggered from right now, or is it being
Exactly.
triggered from the past situation in a relationship or past situation in life?
Yeah, right. Because we all have, and that's really the epiphany. It's understanding, and I was in a session this morning, and I was sharing with a young lady about it in a couple that, you have to understand that emotional behavior or emotions drive behavior. So when someone is behaving in a certain way, from a counselor's perspective, my thought automatically goes to what's driving the behavior, not the behavior. The behavior is a symptom. Why do you feel the need to leave every time you disagree? Why do you have to find the exit? Then we trace that back to experiences growing up, right? Caregiver who had, or the child having an experience with the caregiver that they felt they couldn't communicate. Maybe overbearing caregiver who's overcritical. So easier as an adult to shut down and disengage physically because as a child, that's what you did. So when your caregiver, if when you disengage from your caregiver because of the toxic experiences you had, in other words, they were overbearing, they were critical, they always dogged you, they always were on you. You would disengage from that emotionally. Maybe as a child you couldn't leave the room, but now as an adult, you still feel shut off. Why? Because the moment that spouse says something, emotionally you're in that space. So one of the biggest understandings that most couples don't have and individuals don't have is this: your emotions never age. Emotionally, you're at the same place. You never leave. Emotions are stagnant, it's locked into you. So it doesn't take much to trigger that emotional experience for you to be back in that same space. And here's the subconscious process. Subconsciously, your subconscious doesn't know the difference between your caregiver or your spouse. So it feels what it feels and it reacts. So then the question is why am I feeling the need to leave? Well, now that's what we dig through. But you have to be able to process the okay, I feel neglected. I feel like I'm being criticized. And when I can identify that, that stops me from reacting. It brings me into the present moment. And then I'm asking myself if I'm working with a couple, I'm saying, okay, does your spouse, do you believe your spouse loves you? 9 times out of 10, they're going to say yes. So why do you feel they don't at that moment? And then they begin to realize, oh, it's not, I don't think they don't love me, is I feel at that moment unloved. And so I react from the feeling. I don't react from what I know. So when we get to that point, we realize there's a dichotomy that's happening. My feeling is going one way, but my thought is going another. And I know this person loves me, but when they make a statement or a behavior triggers that disconnection, that's the space I'm in emotionally. I'm back at that 6-year-old kid.
That's one thing, like, when I'm working with husbands, I tell them, like, I tell them the exact age. You pointed out, I
Right.
said, you have to get to know your 6-year-old wife. To be able to
Yes.
understand your wife
Yes.
right now, you have to understand
Exactly.
your 6-year-old wife, that
Yes.
six-year-old girl that's still facing some type of trauma,
Exactly.
whether it was
Exactly.
trauma from family, trauma from
Yes.
friends, whatever it may be, you have to learn them. Once you learn that, and the only way you can learn that is when you start having those deep conversations and opening up and listening, and
That's it.
you'll be able to have those conversations with her and get to know
Right.
her, be able to treat her like she's supposed to be treated, and both of you grow
Right.
together like that.
Right. Because it's the experience that gets us off. So if to your point, if you don't know the 6-year-old version of your spouse and your spouse is fearful or your spouse shuts down easily, then in order for empathy to be built, the perspective has to be different. You can't look at the experience as the intention. You look at the experience as this is what they're offering me at this moment. And if two people are doing that, you constantly have a relationship of empathy and care and grace. Grace is the fundamental practice that keeps a relationship good and healthy. Understanding that your spouse is in the space, your spouse was reactionary, your spouse is not perfect. Grace says, I love this person. They're reacting from their own emotional past pain, and I'm not going to hold that as their intention. I'm going to release them and not hold that against them because I'm looking at them through the version of this is a hurt person who's reacting.
Yeah, this is a hurt person that is reacting to a situation that I may have been the cause of, or I may not have been the cause of it, but
Right.
grace. And a lot of times, like, same way that the Father has grace upon us through his son Christ, we have to have that same grace with our spouses and people in life in general. And that's the part of growing, not taking everything personal. And I'm still learning this. I'm still working on it. I think we all are.
Right.
We all are because
It,
we're all
it never, yeah, we never reach the mountaintop, right? It's just like going to the gym because you went last year don't mean you're in shape this year. I mean, it's the day. You know what I'm saying you was grinding last year, but you ain't saw that joke in 6 months. You looking like, you know what I'm saying? So it's the daily routine, right? And so one of the practices I give people a healthy perspective is I have couples journal a note of thanks for at least 60 days to their spouse. So every day they write a note of thanks. Now, what happens is in the brain functions a certain way. The brain amplifies what you focus on. So if every day I have to write down a note of thanks to my wife, now I did it for over 300 something days, 2015, from January 1st to Thanksgiving Day of that same year. Every day I wrote a note of thanks to my wife in a journal, and I gave it to her on Thanksgiving Day. Now, here's what I learned from that. It blessed my wife, but it changed me because every day I had to challenge myself. What did my wife do? So this is what happened to my brain. My brain began to look for what's good and ignore what wasn't. So now I'm emotionally tied to how I think. So it got to the point by week 3, I was like, dang, I love this woman. She is doing so much. She so even if I came and it was days I would come home and she would just be upset. Rough day going off, just reacting. And I would sit there with grace and calmness and thinking, man, she had a rough day. I didn't take what she was saying as she was attacking me, although if you were looking on the outside, why is she going off on this man? But in my perspective, from my purview, she's had a rough day. Baby, you okay? I know. It was that was a different version of Jimmie because at that point I was intentionally working on gratitude. So gratitude gives grace. So when the moment you start to write down and you chat every day, so I would go to my office, I would think what she did yesterday, I write it in a book journal. Thank you for doing this today. And it built, and you talking about again from January to Thanksgiving Day. That's 300 some days. I'm writing a note of thanks. It changed my perspective because that's really what it's about, your perspective changing. So now I'm approaching her behavior from a position of empathy and grace. Man, she had a rough day. I know she ain't out here doing this. She's reacting from an emotional space. And so when I gave her the journal, because she had no idea I was doing it, it shocked her because I don't write letters, notes. But here it is. Every day I wrote that note of thanks. And every night for at least about a good 3 weeks, she was reading that journal, just flipping. Every time I go to bed, she going over it. That whole process changed me. So when I work with couples, that's one of the assignments I give them. I tell them to write a note of thanks for at least 60 days. I know people ain't gonna do 300 some days. So at least 60 days or longer, because when they do that, they find themselves feeling different by week 2 or 3, by week 3, between week 3 and week 5, they hit everybody different. They feel different because their perspective has changed, because now the focus is what did they do that I'm thankful for, not what they're doing that I'm upset. And the brain is something else, because the brain will overlook what your spouse is doing that's getting on your nerves, that's always got on your nerves. You just do away with that, because the goal is to find what did they do that you are thankful for. So that practice changes the perspective and changes the feeling.
And it's what it is that like that's the brain, that's
Right.
science, it's also
Right.
scripture. It's like
Right.
seek and you shall find. So it's like whatever we
Right.
focus on, we're gonna get. So the more we focus on the good, the more God is gonna present us with the good. But the more we focus on
Exactly.
the negative, he's gonna step back like, hey, you're not grateful for what you do have. So and you always focus on negative. So I'm gonna let you have that negative. But when you want the good, when you want to focus on the good, I will kindly show you that you'll see more of it and you'll receive more of it
Right.
in abundance.
Yeah, because the good is there, right? It ain't left. It's just a perspective.
Hmm.
You can look at the same situation in one or two different ways. It's you're choosing one way, not even realize it. So scripturally, the Bible says put it like this. The Bible says, put on tender mercies. Notice what the implication Paul said. He said, put it on. Why do we put it on? Because it ain't ours. So I have to intentionally put on my coat. I have to intentionally put on tender mercies. How do I do that? I intentionally go into the situation knowing I'm here to bring mercy. I'm here to dispense grace so that my wife experiences grace through me. That's an intentional process. So intentionally put on grace, intentionally put on mercy, intentionally put on forgiveness. Bible says put on Christ, meaning you have to, this is an act that you have to do by perspective. In other words, I'm not just going to wake up and have this. I have to prepare myself, do the things necessary that I am in a position to put mercy on, to put grace on, to put love on. That's the goal, is to understand you got to do the work. It's not organic. You're not going to rise up. You have to do the work to put yourself in that position.
Now, when I say men of valor, husband of purpose, what does that mean
Mhm.
to Jimmie Stephens?
Uh, it means a level of accountability to yourself. So, men of valor, for me, a man of valor is a man who understands his own personal challenges, and he fights through that consistently to present the best version of himself. Man of purpose. I think that was the second thing you said, purpose.
Yeah, husband of purpose.
Husband of purpose. If I'm a husband of purpose, then there has to be intentionality. I have to know my role as a husband. Paul said, husbands, love your wives. How? As Christ loved the church. How did Christ love the church? He gave himself for her. So when I understand my role is to give, I am the giver. I'm wired to give. My body is wired to give. My brain is wired to give. If my wife says something, I'm looking for a solution. Men are designed to give. Women are designed to receive. So my role is to give my life. So when people, like these young cats, 50-50, what you bring to the table, that's the most stupidest thing that ever came into society, because it's ridiculous. These cats ain't lived but 20 something years thinking it's stupid. You can't approach a emotional relationship rationally because it's oil and water. When you understand the epitome of malehood, of husbandry, is to become the source for your family. Provision, protection, cultivation. All that is the purpose of the male husband, to bring that to the home so the wife is not looking and scattering for that. Now, growth development is essential. You don't come off the assembly line ready to rock and roll like that, but the understanding is the first phase. As a man, what's my purpose as the husband? And when I understood that, I'm supposed to give my life like Christ gave his life to the church. I'm supposed to give my life to my wife. So that means the intention of adjustment is always on me. I chose her. That's my responsibility. My wife is the product of my intelligent choice. So if she's stupid, I'm real stupid because I chose a stupid person. So when people say that, like you chose her or you chose that was your decision.
Mm.
So when you understand that that's your decision, do work in your decision. In other words, provide, protect, cultivate, give. Don't go looking up where you know causing my problem. That's stupid too. That's a man who does not have accountability and can't be a man of valor because he doesn't understand he is the one who is in default. A woman will follow a man who is going somewhere. But if you are a man who is unaware of your own emotional pain and setback, you won't go anywhere. And because you won't go anywhere, you become frustrated and you project that frustration onto your wife. So I got these young cats I counsel. I'm like, come on, listen, it ain't that woman's fault that your business failed and she ain't supporting you. You don't know, you can't support you. You don't know where you're going. Be honest with yourself. We all reach seasons in life. Every season, for man, once you hit 40, your mind changes. You stop thinking about what you're trying to build. You start thinking about how you're going to leave. And then you start measuring where you need to go based on where you're at. That can create internal pressure. And if you don't understand valor, you, not her, you, what do I need to do? Who do I need to contact? What mentor do I need? Life is not an island. You can't do this by yourself. You need a man to teach you how to be a man, connect with men. Iron sharpens iron. So when we have that understanding, life is different because now we understand I hold myself accountable to a certain level of behavior, attitude, and provision. If I ain't got it, then I'm making sure that I'm checking myself and making adjustments as needed.
Now you talked about
Yeah,
a man needing a man for counsel, for wisdom, for
yeah,
guidance and community. As a
yeah.
pastor as a pastor and a relationship counselor, how do you help husbands change their perspective?
I listen. I listen. I listen to where they at, and I ask questions because most men don't have somebody asking questions and listening. Because most men don't feel they can communicate to their wife, and they're not talking to the woman they laying with. They got to talk to somebody. That's why men commit suicide 4 times rate as women do, because we don't talk. We don't have anybody to listen to us. So we're navigating life alone. Jesus had 12 disciples, 12 men who could talk to him. They called him master, they called him teacher. In other words, they valued his input. They could communicate his input. That's the essence of, and then and the challenge is this, especially I'm speaking from a perspective of a black male who's 55 years old. You never could trust anybody emotionally. So you learn not to communicate. You learn not to trust. But the older you get, you realize the more you have to emotionally trust so that you're not going through life navigating it from the perspective perspective of being isolated as if you have it all together. So to be a ear for a brother to be able to call me and say, "Hey, Pastor, you got a minute? Can I talk to you?" Yeah, and listen. I'm not here telling you to do. Sometimes I'll give instructions. Sometimes I'm just listening. Like, bro, I hear you. I feel you. I know. Validation. I understand. And give perspective when needed, but mostly be intentional about listening.
That's key. A lot of us do need, other men to talk to. And because we grew up, younger, like, don't get too personal. Don't tell all your business. You going through something, tough it up. You're a man, you're a boy.
Right.
You're gonna be okay.
Right. And you ain't. Right. It's that Superman complex. It's that thing that never happens. It's not real. Men ain't got no feelings. Men don't have no, don't be a sissy. And them same men are crying at night. Right. Them same men are hiding their emotional space because somebody lied to us. Right. They told us that we didn't have what we did have. And men are go through trying to deny and suppress only to explode and implode. That's why the suicide rate for men, again, is 4 times higher than women. Because a woman by nature is community. A woman will talk, a woman will meet another woman and just talk. A
Hmm.
man will meet another man and talk about anything but life, sports, crack jokes. We ain't talking about deep stuff. A woman will get into it with another woman in terms of communicating where they at. So we've been sold a bill of goods that's not legitimate, and we're trying to live up to something that you can't live up to.
I find it that, like you said, a woman is built to talk and open up about community. If a husband can break that shell, like I had to do, I'm pretty sure you did it. Some of the husbands that's
Right.
out here, they listen, they broke that shell of
Right.
becoming open and vulnerable with their wife. And now I can speak for myself that our relationship is like this because
Right.
I broke down that barrier and was able to
Right.
open up and let her know things I never told nobody and
Right.
and just be that. And she accepted it and still sees me, you're my leader, you're my rock. I'm gonna follow you. Even if you make mistakes, sometimes I'm gonna follow you. I'm gonna not only follow you, I'm going to support you and I got your
Right.
back.
Right. Right.
So I think that, if husbands can open up, they will see a more fruitful relationship,
Well,
emotionally and spiritually.
right. And I think in term, some men will never get to that point that you just described,
You're right.
and it's okay. And so that I tell brothers, the main objective is to identify what you're experiencing, because if you never experience communication or vulnerability, you don't know what it looks like or feels like. And it's so foreign to you that your mind can't even go there. But if you can identify what you're experiencing so that you can at least communicate that so that your spouse has an understanding so you don't feel alone, that's going to allow that woman who's a giver to make an adjustment and give care when care is needed and have an understanding of where you're at. Because nothing's more challenging than for a woman to hear reactions and don't know what caused it. And because you don't know what caused it, you can't communicate it.
Now, for someone, a brother that's listening, husband that's listening, wife that's listening, if someone wants to connect with you, where can they find you at online or more about your program?
TGL, Jimmie, Jimmie.com, or Atlanta School of Marriage and Relationship, either one of those.
And I'm going to link the show notes in the description for anyone listening. And let's talk about, we extended time. I know I thank you for, coming out. I have a couple more questions for you.
No
And
problem.
I know you'll talk and I talk. We talked
Yeah.
before. And we've been here for 2, 3 hours. We keep
Yeah. Yeah.
going. But what is the school? What's the name of your church? And in your church,
Okay.
is it centered just around marriage or what is it?
Well, it's not it's we focus on relationships. Relationships and serving our community. That's the mission of our ministry, and that's the Light International Church. And my website is School of Marriage and Relationship. So I always get it because our YouTube is Atlanta School of Marriage and Relationship, but our website is School of Marriage and Relationship. It's no S on the end. So those are two different spaces. So our church is a non-denominational Bible teaching ministry. Of course, we deal with relationships. The principles on relationships are the same principles that govern every part of our life. These principles are inherent in life and in living life. And so reciprocity, right? Jesus said it. He said, whatever man sows, that shall he also reap. So it's understand, give, and it shall be given unto you. So what am I giving? And the giving is an indicator. And when we talk about the law of reciprocity and you read Mark chapter 4, you understand the kingdom of God operates from the system of harvest, of reciprocity, of sowing and reaping. Life is like that. Life is also spiritual law and spiritual principles, I believe, is also prevalent in everything we experience in the world, like gravity, like laws. Natural laws are mirrored by spiritual laws. So we can get an idea. I'm writing a book now in terms dealing with resistance. One of the principles I talk about is the principle or the law of lift. Lift can only happen when there's resistance present. If I'm standing still, I'm not creating resistance. The moment you move, resistance is happening. So the faster I run, inevitably I'm feeling some level of resistance to the wind pushing against me. An airplane flies when there's thrust going against the wind or going against the direction that creates lift. So resistance causes that airplane to go up. So does life. You will never get out of your situation unless you're going a direction and experiencing a level of pushback. The pushback is pushing you up. Western culture, philosophy, somehow inherited, creates this idea that if resistance happens, I'm wrong. Look through scripture, David fought Goliath, three Hebrew boys. So we can go through on, and we can talk about Paul, we can talk about Jesus, we can talk about the disciples. Everybody went through a level of season. Talk about Jacob, talk about Joseph. These resistant experiences created the narrative, the story, the testament or testimony. So we don't quit because it's tough. Toughness and challenges, that's life. The growth happens when there's pressure. A seed doesn't begin to grow until pressure comes from the topsoil and against the bottom, and it pushes it. And now the seed then shell breaks for the germination to happen. That happens through pressure, through resistance. And so your relationship is like that, right? I'm a better version because of the pressure. I'm a better version because now I understand the value of the work and the intentionality that's needed. Stagnant people do nothing and go nowhere because they're not creating any type of friction in life. That's how you have to view life and relationship in terms of resilience. It's understanding that principle of growth, resistance, challenges, pressure is inherent in it and great because that's opportunity. I have a saying, opportunity never knocks, stands idly by. Oftentimes it goes unnoticed because it seems like an unfair exchange, but it never knocks. It's just standing there waiting for you.
Wow. So so resistance is part of the growth. So we have to learn to embrace it. And when does this when does this book come out so we can be on the lookout for it?
February.
Sounds good. And speaking of books, you also have a book out right now called Jimmy Rules. I read it.
Right.
Great book where you go more in depth on emotional intimacy and just being really aware of self. Where can people find that book at?
They can find that on Amazon where books are sold. Audio version, you can get the audio version on Apple or Audible. You can get the book on Apple or Amazon. You can order it, or you can order the printed version from my website, Amazon, or my website, School of Marriage and Relationship, or tgljimmy.com. That's Jimmy with an IE. Any one of those outlets, Amazon, Apple, audiobook, because it's an audio and print and and on a tablet.
Now it is, and fellas, if you're listening, it's a quick read. I
Yeah,
I I did the audio version. I did that within, I forgot how much time, but it was within a day. I sat there,
yeah,
listened to it, took some notes. It was definitely a great read worth checking out, especially if you're a husband of purpose and trying to, build yourself, grow as a husband, grow as a father, grow as a leader. It's definitely a book I highly recommend it. And
yeah.
Pastor Jimmy, right?
Yes.
If you could leave husbands with one practical habit or a lasting message to grow as leaders and build a healthy relationship, what would it be?
Be intentional about learning to be a husband, to be a father. One of the, I'm not the best, but one thing I have done that has impacted my life greatly is become intentional about growing. So listening to podcasts, listening to audiobooks, reading books, workbooks, seminars, going to counseling, sitting down talking to somebody to help me navigate my journey. Intentional about growth requires information. Information changes situations. So you always have to be a student of life. You never know it all. So just be intentional about growing, intentional about getting content, intentional about absorbing it, because the more you absorb it, it becomes a part of your framework and how you view life and situations and circumstances.
Fellas, there you go. Jimmie Stephens, I'm happy to have you that you took time out to come on tonight's show. This has been another episode of Men of Valor, Husbands of Purpose podcast, where we are empowering husbands to lead in life, love, faith, family, and purpose. And guess what? Together we lead. Peace and blessings.